Right, it has been a week of chaos and of course destruction of property and loss of lives. Well, this begs the question. It has been over 10 years since Kenya of course promulgated the 2020 Katiba, and now do we have a healthy of course respect to human rights as that far regard? There is many articles there that of course that have been included in the Bill of Rights that talks about the respect for human dignity. But so far, do we even uphold that very sanctity of a right that has been enshrined in our constitution? Well, that is the discussion that we'll be having tonight with my panelists. I'm talking about Elijah Rotok, that is the advocate and senior human rights officer at the Kenya National Commission for Human Rights. He'll be here just to give us his count of what is happening in the country. And later on still, I'll be joined by Philip Pande. This is the economist and inclusion advisor. We'll be taking account of what is happening and the direction that the country is heading as far as respect for human rights and of course the ongoing demos that has led to this chaotic scene and madness that we are witnessing in the country. That discussion will be coming to you in just a while. But first thing first, let's get our top stories tonight.
Tonight, a house on divide. Kenya Kwanza MPs walked out of parliament as Azimio and Kenya Kwanza trade accusation over police brutality during demonstrations. We will put a stop to demonstrations. Ruto says demonstrations will be a thing of the past as he takes development to our two-coast region. Also tonight, no to arrests. Reprieve for Stuart Mazayo and 11 others as Mombasa High Court issue orders barring arrest of Kilifi Azimio leaders. Plus, decomposed beyond recognition. Pathologist struggles to determine cause of deaths for most bodies of Shakahola victims.
Samuel Kelo will be assisting us in the sign language interpretation tonight. My name is AUMA Evans. Remember, you can follow this broadcast on all of our social media platforms, and we are live on YouTube. You can tweet us at KUTV_Kenya, at AUMA Evans. Remember to use the hashtag Primetime News. Now, Primetime News begins right now. President William Ruto has remained firm in support of the police amid widespread claim of police brutality during the wave of the anti-government protest that has rocked the country in the recent past. Ruto has also continued with his onslaught on violent protesters, vowing to wrestle tooth and nail with the vendors of violence and anarchy in the country. Ruto spoke in Lamu County where he failed to hint on any gesture on meeting Azimio leader Raila Odinga after Tuesday's invitation. Our political affairs reporter Munene Weru kick us off with that report.
The cries of justice let out by Azimio Laumoja in yesterday's vigil have seemingly found the intended audience. President William Ruto in today's sentiments seeming perturbed by Azimio's lamentations. The president, however, refused to fall into Azimio's compassion trap, justifying the alleged use of brute force by the police and lifting their spirits to act decisively in the event of similar predicaments.
Wote mirengo ya siasa, ini mambo hii ingine yote hiyo ni sawa. No problem. Lakini vita, kupiganisha watu, kuharibu mali, hapana. Hiyo haitafanyika Kenya. Haitawezekana. Niliwaambia hawa jamaa Mungu atatusaidia, rega itasimama. Si ilisimama? Niliwaambia pia hii maandamano itasimama. Haiwezi kuendelea na vita na kuharibu mali ya watu. It will not happen.
Today's presidential tour also laid ground for a coastal reunion drawing leaders from the Kenya Kwanza and Azimio Falls in one gathering. The leaders showering support affirmations for Ruto, with his Kenya Kwanza brigade carrying on with opposition banter.
Niwapongeze kwa sababu gavana amesimama kidete na akasema masuala ya maandamano hakuna. Mimi nataka nikupongeze gavana. Mwisho wa tamu yako ama counties hazitahesabiwa kwa maandamano, zitahesabiwa kwa maendeleo ambayo waliletea watu wao.
Despite President William Ruto's controversial invitation to his immediate nemesis Raila Odinga to the negotiation table, the Ruto of today failed to exhibit any signs of extending the olive branch, even further lashing out on the opposition for orchestrating the recent spurt of protests.
Na badili ya kuvaa masufuria juu ya kichwa kwenda kuandamana, wakulima wetu wako busy wanavuna.
Today has been yet another day that has passed after President Ruto's invitation to Raila. With the president now in the country, the ball is now in Raila Odinga's court to stage a March 2017 replay and finally bury the hatchet with the president. Munene Waru, KUTV.
Right, let's stay in coast for a bit. President William Ruto kicked off his 5-day development tour in the coastal region by commissioning several projects in Lamu and Tana River counties. A special emphasis has been put on blue economy project as well as fisheries value chain. Our very own Joseph Oyomo reports on a day that the head of state announced to disburse 32 billion shareable revenue for the counties for the month of July, in addition to 2.3 billion to beneficiaries under the Social Protection Program.
President William Ruto has embarked on a 5-day development tour in coast meant to show up completion of projects in the region. Today, the president inaugurated and commissioned a number of projects in Lamu and Tana River counties, including revitalization of Lamu Port.
Wiki ijayo tunatangaza kandarasi ya strategic investor wa Lamu Port ambaye atakuja ndio tuweze kufanya investment ya pale kwa special economic zone, tufanye investment ya the other parts that are there, na vile vile tuifanye hii Lamu Port iwe sasa ndio port kubwa ya pili katika taifa letu la Kenya.
In the process, President Ruto announced to disburse 32 billion Kenya shillings shareable revenue for counties for the month of July and another sum of 2.3 billion to beneficiaries under the Social Protection Program.
We support devolution because we know what devolution can do. So, leo mi natoa bilioni 32 kwa county governments ya Republic of Kenya ya mwezi huu, sio ya mwezi ingine. Ile ya mwezi iliyopita nilimalizana last month.
A special emphasis has been put on blue economy projects as well as fisheries sector, where the government is said to provide equipment, training, research and value addition to fishermen in efforts to maximize the blue economy, boost incomes and grow prosperity.
Our plan is that in the next 3 years, we should be able to move the fish or blue economy from 20 billion shilling industry to 120 billion industry. And we must continuously invest in both the human capital, training of our fishermen, and also making sure that we have equipment.
These are part of the government's efforts to fast-track its bottom-up economic transformation agenda. The president made the announcement during the official opening of the Lamu County Commissioner's office in Mokowe.
Your Excellency, wananchi wa Tana River hawajajua kwamba wewe umetuokoa Galana na umetuletea wawekezaji. Leo Galana imeanza kuajiri watu wetu. Your Excellency, tunakushukuru kwa kurevive mradi huu. Mradi huu ilikuwa ni lifeline ya watu wa area hii.
Ruto is expected to extend his entourage to the counties of Kilifi, Mombasa and Kwale with more development undertakings, including the issuance of identification documents and title deeds in Kilifi County, rededication ceremony of Kenya Navy's Shupavu, the first warship refitted locally, meeting with port users and stakeholders, inspecting the ongoing rehabilitation of water delivery systems and farm restoration works at the Tana Delta irrigation projects, among other projects. Joseph Oyomo, KUTV.
Right, still in Mombasa, the High Court in Mombasa today issued orders preventing the police from arresting 11 Azimio leaders led by Kilifi Senator Stewart Matzayo. The 11 leaders sought anticipatory bail from court, citing concerns that they were about to be arrested and unfairly charged to intimidate and discourage them from opposing the government stance on the high cost of living. Patrick Oduor now reports.
The High Court in Mombasa has granted the request by 11 Azimio leaders to bar the police from arresting them for participating in anti-government protest. The court issued orders to the police preventing them from arresting the Azimio leaders who claim that they intend to participate lawfully and peacefully in the nationwide demonstrations organized by the Azimio leader Raila Odinga to protest the soaring cost of living and the passing of the Finance Act 2023. Led by Kilifi Senator Stewart Matzayo, the legislators assert that in recent days, individuals and politicians associated with Azimio have faced arbitrary arrest and false charges related to the nationwide protest. Through their lawyer Dansan Omari, the applicants maintain that while they are willing to cooperate with police investigations, they are apprehensive about a malevolent scheme to embarrass them and their families. The applicants argued that without urgent action from the Honorable Court to grant anticipatory bail, their fundamental rights to a fair hearing, peaceful demonstration, freedom of movement, and association with others exercising their political rights will be violated. The High Court's decision seeks to maintain the status quo until the application is heard and determined. Patrick Oduor, KUTV.
Alright, now let's switch gears to Shakahola development. In more development into infamous Shakahola cult development, government pathologists have today conducted additional 12 post-mortem on the victims of massacre. Among the bodies examined was that of a fellow who died in prison after staging hunger strike. 6 of the bodies were male while 4 were women. The gender of the rest of the bodies was, however, not determined due to the severity of the decomposition.
Government pathologists have today conducted an additional 12 postmortems on bodies believed to be victims of the Shakahola cult. The postmortem included a body of one of the Mackenzie cult followers who died in prison after staging a hunger strike alongside a few other prisoners. While addressing the media, Chief Government Pathologist Johansen Odwor, together with the Director of Homicide Martin Nyuguto, reported that 6 of the bodies were male while 4 were female. The genders of the rest of the bodies could not be determined due to the level of decomposition.
Children were the majority, which were 7, as adults were 5. Most of them were decomposed severely.
It is also reported that the follower who died in custody after a staged hunger strike was severely dehydrated and starved upon his arrival in hospital. He died while receiving treatment due to constipation.
He never died in the police cell. While in the police cell, he had refused to eat, so he was brought to hospital while dehydrated, while also starved. And in hospital, he still continued refusing to eat until he passed on.
The autopsies are set to continue tomorrow. Victims are believed to have been part of the controversial Pastor Paul Mackenzie's doomsday cult that doctrinates followers to fast through their deaths to see Christ. At least 400 bodies have so far been exhumed. Yvonne Kemuma, KU TV.
Thank you, Yvonne Kemuma, for that comprehensive reporting. Now, dances, chant and war of words is what described today's parliament proceedings as they debated on Rosa Buya's motion on police brutality witnessed in various parts of the country in the past days. The parliament seemed to be divided into 2 parts and each faction, of course, remained firm on its stand. Kimani Ichung'wah accused gangs and people being ferried from other parts of the country to Nairobi to cause mayhem, as a Lego Usonga member of parliament, Samuel Atandi, accused police of a genocide. Our very own Jacob Okello followed the proceedings and filed the following report.
Chance of no more bloodshed rented the chambers of National Assembly as contested debate ensued on the police reforms laws. A Lagos Soga MP Sam Atandi's claims on police genocide were shrugged off by Majority Leader Kimani Ichung'wah, who demanded the MP to substantiate what genocide is, as the Speaker requested the MP to withdraw his statement.
I want to say, Honorable Speaker, that the police decided to engage in genocide in this country. And Honorable Speaker, we know that the police serves the regime that is in power.
Unless the member can substantiate what genocide is and how the police engage in genocide.
Kimani Ichung'wah's allegations on people being ferried from far to cause chaos in Nairobi evoked similar emotions from the House, with Suna East MP Junet Mohammed demanding to know those behind Kenyatta Farms attack.
Violence that was meted out in Mlolongo was never by the people of Mlolongo or Mavoko, but it's outsiders who are brought in. Honorable Speaker, when you speak about militia, we know the militia and criminal gangs that have been used politically in this country.
This house today is who ferried people to Northland, to the farm of Uhuru Kenyatta. Madam Speaker, is it not the same
Madam
people?
Speaker, can I proceed?
Is it not the same people who ferried people to Tangala, Madam Speaker? And I'm reliably informed. These are people who are in government, Madam Speaker, who are ferrying people.
Madam Speaker. When people being ferried to cause violence, the opposition said everyone has a right to picket in any part of the country. Matters turned to worse when Kimani Ichung'wah called on Luo leadership to stop mobilizing their people to death and bloodshed to ascend to power.
Blood. How many liters of blood is enough? How many body count? How much body count do you want us to count for us to say enough is enough?
It's estimated that 35 people died while hundreds were injured and others arrested by police during the demos. According to Interior Principal Secretary Raymond Omolo, 1 law enforcer died, 305 injured, 158 vehicles and 9 police stations damaged during Azimio demos. Jacob Okello, KUTV.
Right, that story by Jacob Okello takes us to a fast break here on KUTV Primetime News. Of course, plenty more to follow after the break, including our big discussion today. See you in a bit.
Kutoka kuwa jamii ya kuhamahama na sasa kujumuisha kilimo katika mitindo yao ya maisha. Kwenye toleo la kaunti ya Narok, hii ni Boresha Kilimo, kwani afya bora ni kilimo bora.
Kwani kilimo ndicho huboresha maisha.
Maelfu na maelfu ya wahamiaji wakiwa na watoto kutoka nchi za Amerika ya Kati wanaendelea kuwasili kwenye mpaka kati ya Marekani na Mexico.
The folks are going. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Ni habari kutoka pembe zote duniani.
People pass vuguvugu. People pass ni idea.
Tazidi ananyonya, hanyonyi vizuri, anakuwa hayuko comfortable.
Jeshi la Jamhuri ya Kidemokrasia ya Kongo linapambana na waasi wa ADF.
Kwa sasa wanatoa wito kwa mashirika, makampuni na vile vituo vya uchukuzi.
Mambo mengi yatakwenda kama yalivyopangwa.
Hapa ni kuna mmoja wa viongozi wa chama cha wavuvi katika eneo hili.
Zaidi tunajaribu kuwapa chanjo ili ina boost ama inanyanyua kinga ya mwili, ndio inaenda kupelekea kupambana na virusi.
Ni Duniani Leo, Jumatatu mpaka Ijumaa, moja kwa moja kutoka VOA Swahili, Washington DC.
Lola is an app that gives you a chance to watch videos, listen to audios, and read articles wherever you are for free. Motivational stories, dramas, campus life, technology, lifestyle, adventure, sports, academics, jobs, entertainment, and more. Download Lola now on Play Store. All you need, you got Lola.
Alright, welcome back, and this is where we pick the conversation. It has been weeks of rage and chaos with over 30 deaths recorded so far, while of course others still nursing injuries. Others continue to nurse injury wounds that is believed to be of gunshot wounds inflicted by the police. Well, what is worrying, or rather what is disturbing, is the threaded accusation between Azimio la Umoja One Kenya and of course the Kenya Kwanza, that is the government. And while this happened, of course, the big question is who is responsible for the deaths witnessed during the demonstrations, and with more than 10 years down the line since the promulgation of the Katiba 2010, does Kenya really have a healthy human right culture? And helping me, of course, just to unpack all this disturbing question is my guest tonight, who will be joining me in the discussion. Of course, they are already here in the house. That is Elijah Rotok, advocate and senior human rights officer at the Kenya National Commission for Human Rights, and of course Philip Pande, that is economist and inclusion advisor. Of course, I'll start with you, Elijah. Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you for having me.
And of course, Philip Pande will be joining us via Zoom. Thank you so much for making time. All right. Well, now there is some, a bit of statistics that I want to throw to you before we even kickstart this discussion, and I want to draw your attention to Article 37 of the Kenyan Constitution. Well, objective that Article 36 of Kenyan Constitution, which basically states that every person has the right to, of course, peacefully and unarmed to assemble, to demonstrate, to picket, and to present petition to public authorities. Well, that is a very key component, and of course article that will be guiding our discussion tonight. But before that, I want to draw your attention to another article, that is Article 244, that talks about the functions and of course the objective of police. Well, there is some function that has been highlighted under this article, and one of them is to strive for the highest standard of professionalism and prevent corruption and promote transparency and accountability, comply with the constitutional standards of human rights and freedom, that is very important, of course, and train staffs on competence, integrity, and respect of human rights, foster and promote relationship with broader society. Well, that is, the article that to some extent we'll be taking a look at it as far as, we talk about this discussion that is very key at a time that the country seems to be shaking. And of course, there is total disregard to the rule of law. Well, another very important article. Let's take a look at Article 49. Every arrested person has the right to be brought to court as soon as reasonable. To be brought to court as soon as reasonable possible, but not later than 24 hours after being arrested. Well, those three articles, of course, they're very important for this discussion. And now I usher you into this discussion, Wakili.
Thank you very much for having me. First of all, I would like to state that the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights really stands in solidarity with the victims and survivors that have suffered both injuries, various injuries stemming from gunshot wounds, poisoned arrows, stabbings, and even the officer who lost his life during these demonstrations. We are understanding that a significant number of individuals are in hospital, and they are grappling with huge medical bills stemming from the operations that would be done in hospital, and also families that are now coming to terms with the death of their loved ones and are also grappling with funeral expenses.
Okay.
And so with that, it gives us a somber mood as a country, and we can say that some pockets of our society are hurting because of these demonstrations. And as a commission, we commit to investigate into the violations of human rights and take action against actions, especially on torture, cruel and degrading treatment or punishment that was meted out against people who are otherwise peaceful or who found themselves in difficult situations.
Okay.
And with that, now we can go to the various articles that you have cited. I would start initially with Article 37. The right to peacefully and unarmed demonstrate, picket, and submit petitions to various government officials is a right that places an obligation to the state to facilitate the realization of these rights. And it is at this juncture that I must start and say that our leaders need to take cognizance that there is need for them to respect the rule of law, and their utterances have a significant impact into the conduct of how the law is applied and even how the general public will conduct themselves. I would cite examples at this point that we have seen leaders make statements that have led to either police using excessive force in how they disperse or how they deal with protesters. And even on the other hand, we've also seen leaders issue out statements, and we've seen youth mobilize themselves and arm themselves and attack their fellow neighbors because in the name of protests. But for such, we do condemn, and we want to say that such incidences is unacceptable. And hate speech is provided for in the laws of our country, and we are calling for the leaders to bear responsibility for any actions or inactions that might have led to some of these violations that we've seen. Now to Article 244. The conduct of police officers was needed to be professionalized in our manner and disciplined in how they carry themselves while on duty and even off duty. And so the aspirations of our Kenyan people was to see that we need a service that is more professional, a service that is more in touch with the society, because it needs to broaden relations through acts of, mechanisms such as community policing, through mechanisms such as county policing oversight, county policing authorities, where police officers work hand in hand with communities to safeguard the society as a whole. And specific to how they conduct themselves in demonstrations, there are certain parameters that have been put out in our laws. I would cite the National Police Service Act, Section 61. I would also cite the service standing orders and the rules of use of force and firearms. An officer is expected to be trained, tested on how to use a firearm, and found to be professional or has met the standard, and is also taught how to quell demonstrations or escalating situations so as to prevent the likelihood of either using force or firearms. And in the past, we as a commission, in collaboration with other stakeholders such as IPOA, such as the Internal Affairs Unit, have conducted a series of trainings of these officers, especially during the last electioneering cycle. And I can attest to that a significant number, especially of senior ranking officers and even junior officers, were significantly trained. And I want to state also categorically that before the deployment of officers to go and quell demonstrations, there are operation orders, there are commanding structures, and there are briefings that they get on how to manage these protests. And so when we see officers acting in acts that point out to violations of the law, then it brings to question as to whether these officers are really understand or are acting in a manner in which that they are disregarding the law, and it brings concern to all of us.
All right. Well, let me draw you to Article 37 of the Constitution, and this is where there is, a bone of contention. Of course, in as much as the Constitution provide all this, of course, right to picket, demonstrate peacefully, where does it, they say your right begins where your right ends where mine begins. Some of the police officers, others have been killed. We have seen others even injured. At what extent should a police officer, of course, use or be forced to use a firearm?
Okay, thank you very much. You raised two issues there. First is to the limitation of this right that are espoused in Article 37. And I would just cite out about 5 issues. Number one is that the limitation to that right is when the state, in terms of maintaining national security, thinks that the actions of demonstrators or protesters might interfere with the territory and security of the country, then that right might be limited. Issues of public safety is, and in the sense that where there is the suspicion of the extensive damage of property and also the preservation of security of others, then that right might be limited. Also public health, when instances where it is believed that demonstrations or the assembling of people might cause to the spread of diseases such as COVID-19 experiences, then that there could be the limitations of such. Also issues around the rights of others, because we are all in a society and there are all those individuals who do not necessarily want to participate in the protest, and therefore they should be given that opportunity to carry out with all their livelihoods and their businesses without much interferences. This now calls to the close relationships in between the organizers of protests and the National Police Service, so that the right to protest and demonstrate is facilitated by the police in terms of providing security, and also so that any incidences of violences are immediately separated, so that this right is exercised. Now to the conduct and rights of a police officer. A police officer is allowed by law to use a firearm or to use force. And there are circumstances that have been set out in law. One, where there is imminent danger to the life of the officer or the life of their colleague, or where there is threat to serious injury, and then or the significant damage to property. With the officer in this case is permitted, but there is also a procedure in which the officer is required to use the firearm. First of all, the kind of weapon that this officer is allowed to use should be commensurate with the task. But if we see officers using high velocity firearms, such as machine guns against protesters, then it goes against the principles of human rights. Officers can use firearms. They would first identify themselves, after identifying themselves, issue a warning to the protesters to tell them that I'm about to use my firearm. And where necessary, when they should give a significant period for the protesters to move away. And if that is not possible, then in the issue, when you want to discharge that weapon, you should ask yourself, is it necessary? And then is it proportional to the force that you are receiving?
All right.
So you cannot have an officer shooting directly at a crowd. You cannot have an officer shooting towards the air, because they are trained to aim their guns at a particular target and hit the target. And even in the instances where there is imminent threat to their life, they ought to, how they discharge the weapon is to maim and but not cause serious harm or death. So when you see officers aiming at the head or aiming at the central part of the chest, then it calls to question as to whether this officer took necessary action. And there are procedures also whenever a firearm has been used. The police are required to register and report back to their superiors whenever they use their firearm. And if there is grave death or injury, then they are supposed to provide to cordon off the scene where the incident occurred. After cordoning off the scene, identify the particulars of the officer who discharged the firearm, and then report back, and then report also to the Independent Policing Oversight Authority for investigations.
We'll come to the reporting part and even, all these things that are happening. But you have seen traded accusation between the government and, of course, the opposition. Neither side wants to take responsibility pertaining this. Everybody's just shifting, passing the ball from one section to another. We have seen lives, of course, and destruction of properties. Others are still in hospital, nursing injuries. Well, who is responsible? Because at the end of the day, someone must be held accountable.
I would like to answer your question by looking at the provisions of the law. When there are clear set out guidelines, and when responsible officials or individuals or even protesters fail to adhere to human rights that are provided within our constitution and the rule of law, that is when you see a breakdown. And that's why you find political leaders using the opportunity to have a field day in terms of pointing out the fingers and laying accusations. I would want to cite an example where we had officers, for instance, who are in plain clothes, charging out against a crowd, coming in a commando style with Subarus and brandishing weapons in the air and then shooting towards the public, and even chasing after some of the members of the society. And thereafter we saw killings, we saw extrajudicial killings, we saw the shooting of children, we saw even the brutalization of individuals who are within the privacy of their homes. You're flashed out and then beaten senselessly, and these are acts of torture. And so to us, when you see the blame game happening, is because the people that are supposed to observe the rule of law have made it such that you create a circumstance where you are not able to enforce the provisions of this law. For instance, if an officer comes in plain clothes and does not identify themselves, doesn't have a badge, conducts arbitrary arrests, then you would see the trading of accusations as an opportunity where the officers, when you try and pursue accountability, they would say, those are not our officers. Then another politician would say, those were goons, they were hired from the other hand. And so,
talking about accountability, I want, of course, to refer to Article 244 that talks about the objective and, of course, the functions of police. One of them, of course, is to protect the lives and even build that relationship. We have seen such cases. Today is not this time round, this is not the first time we're seeing this happening. We have seen it before. Is it a question of legislation or the implementation? Because we have the laws there, we have the guideline that, of course, guide that the conduct of police in the country. But still, we're still singing the same song. Remember when President William Ruto, of course, took the mantles of power, one of the first things he did, of course, is to dismantle what many call the special killer squad. Today, it's like we are reading still in the same script. Is it lack of, is it the problem is legislation the problem, or the implementation of the legislation is the problem itself? Why are we still in a limbo state?
Thank you for that question. In response, I would like to state that as a guiding principle within the UN framework that Kenya has assigned itself to, laws relating to the use of firearms and force should be reviewed periodically so as to determine how officers should conduct themselves and even how the law should be applied.
Okay.
Now, to me, I see an issue of application. The current law as is, though at times it has its shortcomings, but is sufficient to safeguard human rights. It is sufficient to allow officers to conduct themselves in a manner that is acceptable in terms of the law, and also that would build public trust.
All right.
Now, whether we are seeing an issue about implementation or a historical, I would say point to trainings.
All right.
I would point to the culture that is within the police service, and even the attitude and emphasize on the need for safeguarding the independence, especially of the Inspector General, and also to provide the implementation for holding officers into account. Take note that we have seen arrests of protesters.
Okay.
We are yet to see the arrests of officers.
To that thought. We'll come to the arrest. That is Article, I believe, 49. We'll come to that. Let's get, Philip Pande's point of view. Philip, thank you so much for joining us. And of course, how will you describe the state of affairs right now in the country, given what is happening? We have seen, killings, injuries, destruction of properties. The country seems to be in some sort of a limbo state. How will you describe the state of the nation?
Very well, many thanks for having me, and once again it's a pleasure to talk to you and to our viewers. It is a sad state of affairs in Kenya today that we are backtracking on the gains that we've made in furthering the freedom and the liberties of our people, especially the young people in this country. What I would say at this moment is that we have a deeply rooted issue on accountability and just being able to do the right thing. We have, yes, a good constitution that is anchored into many other frameworks from the global setting, from the African setting. But as a nation, we have absolutely failed to safeguard those rights, to preserve lives, to set people free, to ensure that we are providing a free space for young people and Kenyans to thrive. And allow me to go back into history, that something fundamental, a real milestone occurred on the global space, and that is on 10th of December in 1948 in Paris, and that was the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So whereas we seem to be forgetting the Bill of Rights in Chapter 4 of our Constitution, we seem to be forgetting Article 37 on freedom to assemble, picket, and present petitions. The Kenyan government and our institutions must be reminded about the Universal Convention, the General Rule of the Assembly, Rule 217A, that is talking about the the universal rights. In the preamble of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, one thing that is done is the recognition of inalienable rights, the freedom of our people, and that everybody belongs to one human family, and that is the foundation of peace, that is the foundation of justice, that is the foundation of free societies in the world. So as a nation, as Kenya today, if we forget about our constitution, if we forget about the African Charter on freedom and the human rights, if we forget about every other law, let us remind ourselves of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, where Kenya is a signatory and a partner. So that would be my take, that would be my understanding of the situation where we are today.
All right, well, even as we, of course, remind ourselves about the sovereign and, of course, the very basic component of why it's very important to respect, the dignity and life of Kenyans. Well, it has been over 10 years since the promulgation of the Katiba 2010, and I want to get your thoughts on this. As a country, of course, do you think maybe we are heading forward, or we are making one step forward and two backwards?
Very well. I am a strong believer that the future of our nation and even the present performance in economics, in governance, and overall well-being is best anchored in strong institutions. So yes, we have a good strong constitution that we bestowed upon ourselves 13 years ago, but much as we made, fundamental steps in strengthening devolution and rolling out devolution, for example, we have completely forgotten about fundamentals in the Bill of Rights. And the Bill of Rights in Chapter 4 is a section worth of 40 articles, basically from Article 19 all the way to Article 59, talking about, rights, liberties, and freedoms, and the rights of Kenyans. Nothing, and I say nothing, is greater than the rights, the freedoms, and liberty of a people. If you want to build a strong economy, my emphasis is that you have to go back to institutions. You have to build institutions that respect and enforce markets. If you want to bring a more liberal society and a free society, you must go back and see institutions such as the Ombudsman. You must look at the justice system. We are talking about a time when we're talking about freedom of speech, access to information, freedom from torture, freedom from arbitrary arrest, and freedom from dehumanizing or degrading human aspects that has been bestowed or meted upon our people by the police. The gains that we've made are fundamental, but the backtracking, especially in what we've seen in the early days of this regime, reminds us of the pre-2010 constitution, the much talked about Moi era, the pre-multipartism state in this country. Right. And history is rich of contexts when our people have been abused. History is rich of context when Kenya has become or was a lawless society. So yes, the Constitution 2010 was a fundamental gain in its own rights and in own senses, but we must strengthen institutions. We must be more accountable so that we reap holistically from such a wonderful piece of laws. All right.
Well, Wakili, Philip talks about accountability, and you were talking about Article 47 that talks about the right of arrest person. Yes, we have seen, some of Azimio leaders being arrested and arraigned in court, some even after 4 days. Well, how would you describe this, and why are we still in this kind of, state when we have a clear constitution that mandate, and we have the rights of every person? If you're arrested, there is legal framework that is required for you to be produced in a court before, at least before 24 hours. Well, but that seems to be, the exact opposite of what our constitution actually, institute Kenyans to do. Why are we still, seem to be in a certain state of total disregard of the constitution?
Thank you very much for that question. What is of importance for every Kenyan to understand is that you cannot suspend the constitution, you cannot suspend human rights, and then use either conduct or anything as an excuse. How the aspirations of our Kenyan people was that if you are arrested, you are to be given the right to remain silent, be told the consequences of not utilizing that right to remain silent. You are to be told the reason for your arrest. You are to be told also you are to be accorded assistance in relation to communicating with your immediate family members or friend, or access to an advocate. You are also to be given the opportunity to also be placed in a specific place that is known, especially within the jurisdiction, and you're even given an opportunity for your right to exercise bail or bond. Now, what the realities that we have witnessed is people being arrested arbitrarily. I would cite not only the Azimio leaders, but also human rights defenders, and also journalists in some instances. And to us, we condemn this and we say that it is unacceptable. We are happy that through the Bill of Rights, it has opened up the courts so that if I think that my right is threatened or is breached, then I can quickly access the courts to enforce these rights. And I'm happy to see the leaders not only today, where they went out and the court issued a temporary stopping of further arrests, but we also saw them utilizing the provision of habeas corpus, which is one of the rights that has been categorized that at no point is it limited. It's part and parcel of some of the 5 rights that at no circumstance that this right should be limited. And so when you see people held incommunicado, that their spouses or family members do not know their whereabouts, such that they are groping in the dark, moving from one station to another, looking for them, or you find individuals held beyond the 24-hour before being brought into a court of law, or even having them presented in court in the wee hours in the middle of the night, then it calls to question as to the conduct of the officers who arrested them and what is their intention as to whether they are observing the law, because an officer who arrests any person should present them to a court, and if they want to hold them for a period more than 24 hours, then it should be for the court to determine the number of days that they should be held.
All right. Well, Philip, when you see this, some might call it arrest without detention, denied access to information contrary to what Constitution, of course, provide for. We have seen destruction of property, loss of lives, some even, nursing injuries, believed to be, police to be the perpetrator of these gunshot wounds. Well, as a Kenyan, does it worry you when you see all this happening?
Well, I'm really worried that a majority of time people don't even get an opportunity to exercise Article 37 of our Constitution, because the moment you declare, for example, Azimio declares that we are going to have 3 days of demos or a particular day of demos, the persons that flock the streets before the aggrieved Kenyans are the police. And I'll tell you confidently that last week, for example, on Wednesday and Thursday, I drove through some streets in Nairobi, and I met officers that confessed to me that they were placed at particular roadblocks at 2 a.m. in the morning. And this was way past 4 p.m. Towards 5. So it means that officers, for example, had been, deployed many hours before demos, actually kick off. And the question that one would then ask is, what is the fear of the government? Why would you arraign police and ensure that they barricade roads or barricade streets where innocent citizens are going to exercise their rights? Now, on the issue of destruction of property and perhaps the conflict with the law, this occurs a majority of times when the public are denied access to places where they would want to go. For example, as it may have in the past declared that one of the interests that the coalition had was to present petitions to the office of the president, to State House, and such like places. The question that that begs an answer is, were they allowed to access those areas? The office of the president is a public office. Harambee House, for example, is a public office where every other Kenyan should go and access services. Why do you then disallow access to such a facility? Why would you unleash brutal and full force against citizens unarmed and just exercising their rights? So the act of destruction of property, in my view, is an exercise or a manifestation of frustration of people who did not have an opportunity to access the places they wanted to go to access justice, and therefore they're just, throwing tantrums, I would say, against inaccessibility and inability to be heard.
Okay.
It is not right, however, that anybody should lose property, that any Kenyan should be held ransom because other set of Kenyans are exercising their rights, because as we say, we all have these rights, they are indivisible, they are all belonging to each and every person, and we all have an economy, a space where we should all exercise our rights. So nobody should lose property, nobody should lose working hours, but the rest of the Kenyans that would want to exercise their frustrations, present petitions, picket, and do all that pertains to that article, then should have that without the police being a force against them.
All right. Well, gentlemen, we are really running out of time, but I'll give you 1 minute for your closing remark.
Thank you. To me, I would like to appeal to our country that now we should utilize this opportunity to reflect as to how we are observing the rule of law and the respect for human rights. We are now grappling with the impact and the cost of the demonstrations that have turned out to be violent, where we've seen unrests, we've seen loss of property, theft, and also loss of life.
Okay.
And so, as we should utilize this opportunity to now look at and reflect internally, to call upon the state to ensure that when people want to protest, they should allow them to do so in a peaceful manner and facilitate the process instead of providing an hindrance or quelling in such a manner that is suppressive or intimidating and using brutality or causing severe pain and suffering for individuals, or even collectively punishing as a section of people because of in the name of quelling of protest. And so this calls upon us to examine really the conduct of officers and also the conduct of some of the members of the public who have taken advantage of the peaceful protests to cause mayhem and to cause injury in the same. And so it calls for us to reflect on human rights and to call specifically for accountability, not only for any person that has gone against the law, that they should face the arm of the law at this juncture.
All right, fair enough. Well, Philip, 1 minute, kindly.
What I would say is let us account to our people. We know that lives have been lost, but we've overly talked about destruction of property and loss of economic time or productivity in our in building our nation. Let us account to those who've died, those who've been maimed, those who've been brutalized, and let us show remorse to the families that have witnessed or experienced utmost violence from a government that should otherwise protect lives, preserve property, and uphold human dignity. This country belongs to all of us, whether you support government or whether you are anti-government, because everybody has a right, an inalienable right for that matter, to belong to Kenya, to exercise their rights and freedoms within Kenya, and those liberties must be safeguarded by the government. So I would want a country that declares that, yes, we disagreed, but how many of our citizens have lost their lives in the process? How many of our citizens are nursing homes? How many families have lost eternally their breadwinners because of a police that does not care or account to its people?
Well, thank you. Well, Philip Pande, economist, inclusion advisor, thank you so much for making time.
Many thanks, and a great pleasure talking to you and our viewers.
All right, Elijah Rotok, advocate and senior human rights officer at the Kenya National Commission for Human Rights. Asante sana for making time.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, now let's move on to other stories of the day. Interior and National Coordination Cabinet Secretary Professor Kithure Kindiki accompanied President William Ruto on Mukure during the launch of the Lamu County Commissioner's Office, where he called on security officers countrywide to remain non-political, diligent, and patriotic in the execution of their duties of protecting the lives and property of all citizens. Lynette Maina now reports.
While accompanying President William Ruto in launching Lamu County Commissioner's Office, Cabinet Secretary Kithure Kindiki has extended his enhancing security campaign in Lamu, where he called on security officers countrywide to take action against any offenders in the maandamano period. The newly built Lamu County Commissioner's Office will come in handy for the Lamu residents in need of various services.
Na vile sasa serikali imekamilisha ujenzi wa jengo hili la mkuu wa county ambaye ni mwakilishi wa serikali kuu hapa, departments ama idara zile zingine za serikali zitakuwa tusikijumuika na county commissioner hapa, ikiwemo idara ya elimu, idara ya vitambulisho, idara ya mambo ya ile births and death certificates. Wananchi watapata huduma hapa karibu.
Kithure Kindiki has complimented Lamu County leadership, saying that it was among the counties that maintained peace during the countrywide anti-governmental protest.
Hii county ya Lamu imekuwa sasa ni mahali pazuri, mahali pa kiutalii, mahali ambao kuna uchumi wa bahari na vile vile kuna uchumi wa mambo ya kilimo, kwa sababu hii Lamu inasalisha pamba, inasalisha matunda, inasalisha simsim na vile vile inasalisha mahindi. Wananchi wa Lamu wameweka amani wakati huu nchi yetu imekuwa na matatizo ya kisiasa.
While calling upon security officers countrywide to remain non-political, Kindiki Kithure has issued a notice of arrest of any offenders regardless of their political reference or religion.
Sisi ambao ni vitengo vya usalama umetuagiza ya kwamba kitu cha kwanza haungetaka vitengo vya usalama vijihusishe na mambo ya siasa. Ya pili, umesema ya kwamba ungetaka tufanye kazi na viongozi ambao wamechaguliwa ili tukusaidie ili uendeleshe mambo ya taifa letu. We will not allow any person in this country under your administration to misuse the Constitution of Kenya, to misuse fundamental rights and freedoms guaranteed in our Constitution, to hurt fellow citizens, to obstruct the economic development of our country, to burn shops, to burn infrastructure. We are going to be very firm. We'll deal with them very firmly.
The security governmental projects in Lamu County, which has been in the past associated with years of unrest, will help the county in maintaining and improving their level of security. Lynette Maina, KUTV.
Now from, of course, that is in Lamu all the way to Nyeri. Nyeri County Governor Mutahi Kahiga has led other county leaders in launching ceremony of the County Development Plan for the year 2023-2027. The plan, consisting of 103 billion, will enable the county to perform its responsibilities for the 5 years. As Jacob Okello reports, the plan will center on 5 key pillars, including agriculture, general economic, commerce affairs, and rural development.
County Governor Mutahi Kahiga has led other county leaders to achieve responsibility of the Constitution Section 108 of County Government Act of 2012 that requires counties to provide a 5-year development plan that will guide the county to achieve its duties. The governor said the plan is in line with the government's bottom-up agenda to elevate all Kenyans and aim to create employment, equal distribution of resources, increase tax collection, and other emerging issues such as gender equality.
This has placed special focus on increased employment, more equitable distribution of income, social security, and expanding the tax revenue base. Further, I am alive to the emerging issues such as the impact of climate change, gender, youth, disability, mental health, mainstreaming, among others.
Aiming to strengthen the county by improving locals and business environment, the governor added that to achieve the plan, he will center on 5 sectors including agriculture and rural development, economic and business issues, infrastructure, and public administration.
The plan centers on 5 sectors who are here, and they have already spoken. You have heard them. That is agriculture and rural development, general economic and commerce affairs, infrastructure, energy, rural and development, public administration and governance, and social services.
According to his plan, 9 billion shillings have been allocated to jack agriculture, 7.1 billion to improve roads, 1.2 billion to strengthen health sector. To attract investors, the county will collaborate with national government to build an industrial park and build affordable houses worth 1 billion shillings.
A total of Kenya shillings 9 billion will be set aside towards boosting crops, livestock, and aquaculture productivity. My administration will also roll out programs to enhance agricultural value chains through aggregation, agricultural financing, value addition, and marketing of farm produce to improve income for farmers across the county.
The governor asked the national government, political leaders, and locals to work together to achieve the plan, which costs 103 billion shillings. Jacob Okello, KUTV.
Well, it's time to take a look at the latest in the world of sports. National men and women hockey team is hitting the ground running at their residential training camp at Nairobi City Park ahead of Africa Olympic qualifiers that will be held in Pretoria, South Africa from October 29th to November 5th this year. A total of 16 teams will take part in the qualifiers, with winners booking automatic slot to quadrennial showpiece.
As they prepare for the upcoming Africa Hockey Olympic qualifiers to hunt tickets to represent Kenya and Africa in the upcoming 2024 Olympic Games in Paris, France, these are players who carry the hopes of a nation. And as the players face the press, there is one big question.
Hii ticket tunaipata au ni aje?
Yes, we are optimistic because the training started, I think, 3 months ago. And according to the coaches, the plan they have given us, I think we have a chance to qualify for the Olympics.
It does feel that if any team can do it, they can. They go into qualifiers as one of the favorites, having come close before in 2019 but faced a major setback.
We must be optimistic, otherwise we should not be in this business, because it is our aim in the long term to improve our ranking. How do we improve our ranking? By putting up good performances.
Our last performance was not good, but I'm hoping this time it will be good because we are working on our weakness. Mostly we are going to work on our short corner execution, which is a key point at any given team.
The team is under transition, having lost some of senior players, but it is this set of young players that assistant coach Michael Mulungu is counting on them to make a difference.
I must say we're on track, because there are the technical and tactical aspects that we've been working on. The individual technical aspects, for the individual players, and then now the team tactics. That is what we are working on.
But the journey ahead is not easy.
Other teams are also preparing for this, but the top two teams, that is South Africa and Egypt. But this time round, I think we are going to give our best so that we can come out also best in Africa.
As both men and women teams prepare for Africa 2024 Olympic qualifiers game in South Africa, they know the task at hand is not easy one, but this team has taught us to dare to dream. AUMA Evans for KUTV, Nairobi. Well, that's all for us from this part. Of course, thank you so much for keeping us company from the for the last 50 minutes or so. We wish you a very blessed good night and keep it always KUTV. My name is AUMA Evans. Samuel Kelo has been our sign language interpreter tonight. Bye bye.